where they don't contradict him, his version,
Yes.
or don't implicate him
Yes.
in any wrongdoing,
Yes, Chair.
you don't have really to go through that unless you want him
That's-
to confirm something.
That's fine, Chair.
Yeah.
That's fine, Chair.
And I take it he has had a chance to read all of these emails.
Yes.
Yeah, if there is a particular one where he feels he would like to
Yes.
comment that you don't touch, he may do so.
Yes.
But the ones that you need to focus on, the evidence you need to focus on to put to him is where they either say something that's inconsistent with his version, or
Yes.
they contradict him, or they implicating him in some wrongdoing, or if you want him to confirm a particular version.
Thank you, Chair. I'm with you. Let me approach it this way, Mr. Tsotsi. Thank you, Chair, because that helps me expedite it. Let me approach it this way, Mr. Tsotsi. The involvement of Mr. Linnell is apparent from the facts. The involvement of Mr. Linnell by the board in matters pertaining to the intended inquiry. You can see that from the documentation, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to then accelerate to the charges that get brought against you by the board, because that is decided in the meeting of the 19th.
Yes.
And one of those charges is that you had commissioned the drafting of a media statement which went without the board approval. Let me see that. You find in the reference bundle, which I'll quickly read it. Charge 3 says, the director authorized the commissioning of a media statement in relation to an inquiry into the affairs of the company with the assistance of the consultant without the knowledge and or consent of the board. That charge goes on to say, this media statement consequently fell into the public domain. The media statement contained numerous inaccuracies and misinformation which may lead to the company facing potential legal action from third parties named therein. Now, we know that you have dealt with this at this meeting, and maybe you could open to the reference bundle for Mr. Tsotsi so that we can quickly deal with this particular allegation.
Well, I don't know what you have in mind, Mr. Slege, but I do recall that I think Dr. Ngubane, it would be fair to say, to a very large extent, he struggled to explain at least some of these charges. I do remember that I asked him whether he agreed that they couldn't charge Mr. Tsotsi for involving Mr. Linnell in the affairs of the board and Ascom and the role he was to play, because they had a chance to tell him, we don't want this man here, have you followed procedures? And my recollection is that Dr. Ngubane could not defend that part of the charge. and he sought to say something else. I can't remember what he said, and which my impression is might not have been in the charge sheet, in the first charge. So whatever they have said, it doesn't really contradict seriously what Mr. Tsotsi has said. We don't need to spend much time on that. The best one thing you can do is just mention to Mr. Tsotsi what they said, and if he has comments, he can comment. Otherwise, we move on. It's only in regard to those where they may have sought to resist or justify their decision to charge him with the various charges. Now, I know that on the one about the media statement, both, certainly Dr. Ngubane, I think to say they struggled as well in the face of questions to defend that. But you might have a better recollection, and you might have a recollection that is different from mine. All I'm simply saying is, where we don't need to be detained where they didn't come up with, they were not able to defend the charges. But there may be one or that they seemed to defend, I'm not sure, but even with that, I'm struggling to remember which one. But yeah. You are younger, so you and your junior is even younger, so you might have a better memory than me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Chair, thank you. Then that's exactly the reason why I left Charge 1 and 2 and I went to 3.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Because
sure.
3, that's where they seem to be.
Yeah.
Like a dog holding on to a bone. I didn't want to let go.
Yeah.
Mr. Tsotsi.
I'm in the worst position memory-wise, Chairman.
I can understand, Mr. Tsotsi.
The first part of Charge 3, I agree with the chairperson. It's neither here nor there. Because we can see from the documentation, the evidence led, that they engaged with Mr. Linnell in the drafting of the statement. But they say the statement was leaked. And they want you will know that you leaked the statement. And they are hanging on to that. You want to respond to that quickly?
Chair, like I said, yes. Clearly that I deny my leaking the statement. It makes me wonder what would be the purpose of my leaking the statement in the first place.
Yeah, no, I think, Mr. Selege, on that one, there's a problem, because I asked Dr. Ngubane why the chairperson would have wanted to leak a media statement when he knew that all he wanted is to get the board to approve. And you remember what Dr. Ngubane's response was? He said something like about an ego or something.
Yes, Chair.
So continue, but
no, that's
really,
fine.
yeah.
No, we won't belabor the point, but that was just to give you a chance, Mr. Tsotsi, to put your response to that on record.
If other board members come and tell us something different, then we might bring you back. There are some board members who must still come, like Mr. Romeo Kumalo, but
there wasn't.
Those that have testified on this, I think there were some challenges.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Chair, let's test this one. They also, Mr. Tsotsi, mentioned something about you having proposed to the board members that one Mr. Malisela Sekasimbi, who was at that time on suspension, a fact which they say you did not disclose to the board, you propose that he be appointed to one of the acting positions of those who were suspended.
I think,
There's-
didn't they say CEO, acting CEO? Or maybe not acting CEO, but yeah.
Mr. Tsotsi will...
What do you say to that? Evidence?
Yes, Chair.
May I say that as you answer, Mr. Tsotsi, I am aware that that is not one of the charges. But I am aware that they have said they were unhappy about that as well. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do
Yes.
understand. I just want to, without belaboring this issue, Chair, just to put it in perspective. The issue regarding Mr. Sekasimbi and Sumitomo dates back to 2008. So it's an old issue. And I just want to confine myself with what they are concerned with, meaning that I suggested someone who is suspended should act in the position of the group executive, technology and commercial. Now, the situation, Chair, is that after the said incident for which Mr. Sekasimbi was suspended, I spoke, and this happened at the end of February 2015, around end of February 2015, somewhere around there, if not very early March 2015. I then raised this issue with the Chief Executive, Mr. Matuna, and I asked Mr. Matuna to look into this because I think, at the time I said to him, I felt that Mr. Sekasimbi was being hard done by because he really has nothing to do with the charge that is being laid against him, and that he should see to it that Mr. Sekasimbi is taken out of suspension because he's not involved in...
Sorry, Mr. You may deal with that later when I put to you Mr. Gogo's version. But just address this one of whether or not you had suggested to the board at the time of the suspension of the executives that one of the acting persons should be Mr. Sekasimbi, and you did not disclose to the board that he was in fact on suspension.
Chair, that's not correct. That's not true. The fact of the matter is, when I raised the issue of and queried the names of the people who are going to be suspended, who are going to be taking the places of the people who are suspended, I said to the board, in regard to Mr. Sekasimbi, he would have been the person appropriate to act in the position of Mr. Machela. But he has been suspended, and I even commented that I was very unhappy with the suspension because I did not believe that he merited to be suspended. And the name that was brought forward was that of one of the engineers who worked with Mr. Machela, who then subsequently became the person who acted. So I did tell the board or the members of the P&G committee at the time that Mr. Sekasimbi was under suspension and therefore could not act. I merely brought up his name because I felt he was the person who was appropriate for that position. It is then that the name of the other person came up, who eventually ended up acting.
Is that...
I wonder, Mr. Slega, whether
Yes.
in the minutes or in the transcript, the recording, this part is reflected in any way. Yeah.
I have the minutes right here, Chair.
Oh, okay.
So that's telepathic communication, Chair. That's in the reference bundle, Chairperson, Mr. Tsotsi, the minutes of the 30 March 2015.
Yes.
Have I got the reference bundle?
The reference bundle. Ascom bundle Is it 12? Yes, Ascom bundle 12.
Okay, and what's the page number?
The page number is 230.
230, okay.
230.
You can continue as soon as Mr. Tsotsi has found the page
Yes.
in the meantime. But you will know whether we
Which
need
part is
to
it?
check or to find it, if we
Correct.
can do without.
Yeah,
It
I'll
just
just, let me
depends.
read it. Let me
Okay.
read it. Mr. Tsotsi, you are called to this meeting on the 30th of March
Yes.
because you couldn't be removed on the 19th of March. On the 30th of March, you have the charges given to you, and now you are making your presentation to the board on each one of the charges. And although Sikasimbi issue is not one of the charges,
Yes.
you did address it in that meeting. At the bottom of the page of 230, the minute taker records, in respect of the nomination of Mr. Sikasimbi as acting CE, and this is what Chairperson recollected earlier. Mr. Tsotsi stated that although Mr. Sikasimbi was a good candidate, he could not be considered as he was on suspension. So they record that you said this.
Yes.
So this is, these are minutes of what meeting?
These are minutes of the board meeting, Chairperson, page 226,
Of what date?
on 30 March 2015.
Oh, so this is now, they are recording what was said on that date
Yes,
about something that happened before.
that's right.
And would be interesting now if there is anybody who says, no, but you said you want him to act.
Chair, if you turn to
Yeah.
page 232, these are the minutes that get to be signed more than a year later by Dr. Ngubane on the 18th of November 2016.
And there is no indication of anybody who contradicted Mr. Tsotsi to say that's not what you told us at the board 2 weeks back or whatever.
Not at all,
Yeah.
because in fact, on page 231, the second last paragraph, it says the acting chairman thanked Mr. Tsotsi for his presentation and asked members if they wanted to clarify on any items. And I put this to Ms. Venita Klein, that they were given the opportunity to ask questions on Mr. Tsotsi's presentation. Why didn't they ask questions? Yeah.
I remember. Okay, no, that's all right.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like, Mr. Tsotsi, these minutes seem to be consistent with what you are saying in terms of what you say you had told the board about Mr. Sekasimbe, because you are saying you had told them that although he would have been, in your view, the right person to act, he was suspended and therefore could not, which is what this says. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Tsotsi then related to this issue of Mr. Sekasimbi is the Sumitomo issue, which is alleged quite extensively by Mr. Koko. Mr. Koko has provided the commission with an affidavit in which he says, you signed a letter to Sumitomo, a Japanese company, committing Ascom to a payment to this company. And when he discovered this, I think the letter was either sent by Mr. Sekasimbi to Sumitomo, or was it brought to you by him? He then took steps to suspend him. You were unhappy about the suspension of Mr. Sekasimbi. You asked Mr. Matuna to approach Mr. Koko about the issue. According to Mr. Koko, you said to Mr. Matuna, tell Mr. Koko to reverse the suspension. And he said he will not reverse the suspension. And as a result of his refusal to reverse that suspension, he believes that that's how he was suspended on the 11th of March 2015. Because Mr. Matuna said to him, if you do not lift the suspension of Mr. Sikasimbi, you and I are going to be suspended. And he believes on the 11th, that's how he was suspended. It's because of you.
Chair, that's a complete fabrication. I think the corroborations of the ADNA witnesses who have come before this commission, for me, are sufficient to dispel the idea that Mr. Machela is proposing. To the extent that I recall very specifically that Mr. Matuna himself does not accord with what is being alleged he is supposed to have done or said. So I have to dismiss what Mr. Machela is alleging.
Yeah, well, at least there seems to be an acceptance by many of the witnesses that the idea that he and the other executives should be suspended is an idea you got for the first time at the Durban meeting. So that there is that. But he will give his evidence and will hear. He might have genuinely believed that it was because of that, and maybe by now he has had a lot of evidence if he's following about where the idea of the suspension of the executives seems to have come from. So he will come and he will give evidence.
Yes, Chair. Chair, I may just point out, yesterday we received a supplementary affidavit from Mr. Matuna where he rebuts those allegations. We have forwarded
to Mr. Tsotsi.
to Mr. Tsotsi and Mr. Koko.
Yes, okay. All right.
That
Okay.
affidavit will find itself into the bundle of Mr. Matuna in
Yes.
due course.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Mr. Koko, Mr. Tsotsi, I beg your pardon. Linked with that, because, you know, it's important, we haven't touched on the sequence of events, and you need to tell the chairperson the sequence of events insofar as you can recall. When I talk about the sequence, I mean the chronology, the dates of the events. Because then you get to the time when you meet with the minister, where the minister says to you, Mr. Chairperson, I understand from the management and from the directorate that you are interfering with the executives. Now that is in 2015.
Yes, that is in 2015, around the time of the SONA.
The State of the Nation address.
Yes,
That is in February 2015.
yes.
Because Mr. Tsotsi alleges that the issue of Sumitomo arose during or about June 2014.
Mr. Matuna.
Mr. Koko.
Okay, Mr. Koko, yes,
Yes, I beg your pardon. Mr. Koko.
yes. That's about correct.
Now, the minister in her affidavit explicitly says an executive came to her, one executive, and complained about you interfering with management. Chairperson, the same bundle of Mr. Tsotsi, page 450.
The reference bundle, not the reference bundle.
No, the one of Mr. Tsotsi,
Oh, what page?
page 450. Yes, Ascom Bundle 7, bracket A.
Yes.
Page 450, paragraph 1. It starts at 100, but I want to pick it up at 101. Because at 100, the minister refers to the question which we asked her, and we put the version of Mr. Tsotsi to her about the meeting in February 2015, which she reproduces there. And
fine.
you found
Yeah.
Mr. Tsotsi?
Yes.
Okay. Then paragraph 101, the minister says, the only related conversation I remember having with Mr. Zola Tsotsi related to his interference with management or operational issues as opposed to directorate issues. In his oral testimony before the commission, he confirms this. Referring to me, he says, whereupon the minister had, well, in this instance, she was not happy about the fact that I was said to be interfering with management. There have been complaints about Mr. Zola Tsotsi, both from the executives and the directorate. Now, she adds the directorate. What comes to mind in particular was that one of the executives came to see me in person, complaining about Mr. Tsotsi's interference with operational issues, producing a letter allegedly penned by Mr. Tsotsi to a Japanese company about buying oil or some other fuel. I decided I had to intervene, says the minister. This is why I invited Mr. Tsotsi, reprimanded him, and directed him to refrain from interfering with management. As to the verbatim exchange, I cannot recall. I do recall that the meeting was tense. The exchange could have been intemperate. I must also say that I did not have the best of relationship with Mr. Tsotsi. We did not really get on well with each other, she says. But do you know what the minister is talking about there? The Japanese company?
Yes, Chair. I must assume that when she says one of the executives came to her to complain about my interference in management, she must be referring to this incident, and hence, consequently, referring to Mr. Machela as the person who would have come to her.
But,
So,
was it something acceptable for any executive at Ascom or any SOE for that matter, other than at least the CEO, group CEO, to bypass this group CEO, bypass the board, and go and speak to the minister about issues at work? Was that something that was permitted? Was that using the right channels? Wasn't the position that normally you would be the contact person for the minister, but obviously if somebody needed to complain to the minister about you, they would not ask you to speak to the minister about it, but then one would have thought that any executive would speak to the group CEO, and it would be the group CEO who one would have expected would first raise the issue with you or with the board. But certainly, if the group CEO approached the minister about a complaint relating to the board or to the chairperson, one might be able to understand that compared to an executive lower than the group CEO, bypassing the group CEO, going to the minister to speak about the chairperson of the board.
you're correct, Chairman. The protocol in the organization, it was very clear about how the communication should work the least I would have expected would be for the chief executive to have received such a complaint and put it to me. And if he felt that he needed to pass it on to the shareholder because it involved the chairman, then he had the opportunity to contact the Director General, who then could process the issue at the level of the minister.
The minister.
That would have been
The channels.
the channel, yes.
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 Okay, all right. And the minister doesn't say anything here about having taken objection to this executive, whoever it was, if it was not the group CEO, bypassing the group CEO and the board and going to talk to her.
Not only that, Chair, but to elaborate some on this matter. When she approached me about this particular issue, and of course I knew what she was talking about, she did not even ask from me what my side of the story is.
Yes.
She didn't say to me, what is happening? Can you explain to me what actually transpired? She decided that it was opportune for her just to reprimand me on the basis of what she had been informed by a member of the executive.
The executive, yeah.
Who didn't bother to follow any proper protocol.
Yes, yes. Mr.
Thank you,
Seleka.
Chair. Yes, Mr. Tsotsi, I intended exactly to ask you the question.
Sorry.
No, that's fine, because although the minister says what she's saying, the question is, did she mention that to you? Did she say to you, this is the reason why I'm speaking with you? One executive has said to me, you've written a letter committing Ascom to payment in respect of this Japanese company.
No, she never addressed the issue at all.
Well, your version is up there. The minister has reproduced your version in her affidavit. Do you see that? And this is where the minister says to you, Chairman, I have received complaints from management and board members that you are interfering in management. Please refrain from doing so, because if you don't, I shall have to find someone else to do your job.
Yes.
But she later in her affidavit says, as to the verbatim exchange, I cannot recall.
Yes.
Well, it does appear on her version, on her own version, it does appear like she didn't give you a chance to respond to whatever the executive concerned or board members who might have spoken to her, what they really said you had done wrong.
That's correct.
It does appear on her version, she had made up her mind, whatever they had told her, you had done.
Yes,
And
correct.
she was then reprimanding you and saying, stop it, otherwise I'll find somebody else to do your job.
Correct.
That's the impression one gets from her own version.
Yes.
Then, Mr. Tsotsi, there's another version of the minister which I want to place to you. Turn the page to 451. This is now in regard to your removal, Mr. Tsotsi.
Chair, I don't know if I may want to belabor this point, but it is noteworthy that the individual who was the subject of all of this brouhaha about my interfering with management went to the CCMA and was what is the word now? What's the legal word? Shall I say acquitted? Is that correct? Or was the CCMA
Vindicated?
He was vindicated in the CCMA that he had been unfairly treated by this action
Yes.
of suspension.
So his suspension was found to have been unfair.
Yes.
That is now we're talking about Mr. Seku.
Sikasimbi.
Sikasimbi.
Yes, Sikasimbe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're just making the point that your views that you held about his suspension were vindicated because the CCMA found that the suspension was unfair.
Correct, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Tsotsi, you will assist us obtain that information.
I'll gladly do, Chair.
Thank you. Was he reinstated?
there was an instruction from the CCMA, I gather, that he was to be reinstated, but the person in charge of the CCMA proceedings, I gather, indicated that he would be entering a hostile environment, work environment. He's entitled and should go back to work, but the person felt that he would be entering a hostile work environment and may have to opt for negotiating his departure from the organization. But I think the ruling of the CCMA will make it clear as to what actually transpired.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then, so in regard to your removal, I've said page 451. The minister there deals with the removal of yourself as chairman of the board. And she says in paragraph 108 that this was a board issue and I did not interfere. I did not have any private discussions with Mr. Tsotsi about this. I do know that eventually Mr. Tsotsi and the board reached some understanding and settled the matter. As I understood the arrangement, he would resign so that his name does not get tarnished as a director, and so can continue serving on other boards.
Of course, she wasn't there. She's just saying this based on whatever reports she had received.
And that's what we want to test, Chairperson.
Yeah,
That's exactly
but I
what
don't
we
know
want.
whether you want to test that with Mr. Tsotsi, because it's not somebody who was there.
Okay.
You see, so I don't think you should
Okay,
test
Chair.
that with Tsotsi. The people who can speak about that are board members. She must have received certain reports.
Yes, Chair.
She's interpreting certain things, so I don't think I think you should move on to something else, yeah.
Good.
Because she was not there, she was not part of the board mission.
Should I ask him one question, Chair?
Yeah, okay.
In regard to this,
Okay.
she did not interfere.
Mm.
Mr. Tsotsi, are you able to respond to that allegation by the minister that she did not interfere in the issue between you? What she says is an issue between you and the board.
Chairman, let me say what I know,
Yes.
and one can make a judgment as to whether that constitutes interference or not. The meeting of the 19th of March, where I first encountered these charges, that meeting finished in the early hours of the morning, around 1 o'clock or something. And the same day, I knew and I was told that the board had requested, in fact it's in the minutes, the board requested to have a meeting with the minister. Now, when they asked that I should recuse myself from that meeting, it was patently obvious to me that they were going to talk about me and the issue that they'd raised with me the previous meeting. Now, I have consistently asked for minutes of that particular meeting, because for me that would have been very significant, because I needed to know how the board presented the issue to the minister, because that will determine her own role in terms of how that meeting was conducted. And I've consistently not been able to find those minutes. I recall in Cape Town at the parliamentary hearing, I specifically pointed out the fact that those minutes were important for one to get a sense as to exactly what happened in that meeting of the 20th. And I think it would be worthwhile to explore with members who were present at that meeting exactly what happened. So her presence there and the discussion that went on culminated in now my formal my being formally charged. Now, I think it's up to whoever wants to make a determination as to whether the minister effectively interfered or not.
Have you tried to get those minutes?
The minutes, Chairperson, of the 19th, when Mr. Tsotsi is
No, I think the one he's talking about is
The 20th.
between the board and the
And the minister, yes. In
That's
Cape
the,
Town,
those are the
20th.
minutes he's
Oh, no,
talking
we
about.
don't have those minutes, Chair.
Have you asked for them?
Yes, Chair. They've searched for those minutes. I see my investigator is signaling to me. Yes, they did search, ask for the minutes. They were not given. If those minutes exist,
But do we know whether minutes were taken?
no, Chair.
What, I don't know whether during your time, the board or members of the board had ever had a meeting with the minister other than in a situation where the minister came to a meeting of the board, in which case there would be minutes. But if they went to see her, would minutes normally be taken, do you know?
They ought to be taken, Chair. There's no reason why they shouldn't be taken.
If
By
it's
the same
formal
token, minutes were
business,
available.
Because they are coming to discuss formal business.
Correct.
But
Minutes
in
were
terms
available.
in terms of your experience, had there been such meetings, or had there been meetings between the board or members of the board delegation with the minister outside of board meetings? And if so, would there have been minutes that were kept in the past because you were the long-serving member of the board?
Chair, I don't recall there being a meeting with Minister Kigaba.
Yeah.
Actually, only attended, to the best of my recollection, a meeting when we've asked him or he has requested to address a particular issue.
Yeah.
But that did not happen very often.
Yeah, okay. Well, at least what should be done is to get people who would know that about that meeting, such as the person who was the chairperson of the board at the time, or who was acting as chairperson, and the company secretary, if he or she was there in that meeting with the minister.
Yes.
To depose to affidavits to say, did the meeting take place? Were there minutes? What was discussed? There should be affidavits by people. The minister herself should be, if she doesn't deal with that in her affidavit, should be asked to depose to an affidavit and say whether such a meeting did take place with her, what was discussed, as far as she knows, were there minutes, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue.
Mr. Tsotsi, so you're saying that there was a meeting on the 20th of March?
The 20th of March, yes.
So you were not invited to that meeting?
I was explicitly excluded from that meeting, yes.
Who told you that you were excluded?
I recall, I think it was Dr. Ngubane who asked that I should recuse myself. Because he was acting chairman at the time.
Yes, no, we see.
Well, I don't know if the two of you are not talking at cross purposes. Were you asking him whether he was not invited to the meeting between the board and the minister?
Yes.
Okay.
Of 20 March.
Of 20 March.
Yes.
That's the meeting we have been talking about.
That's right, Chair.
Yes. And Mr. Tsotsi, you said you were excluded from the meeting. Were you saying that because the decision to go and see the minister was taken in a meeting from which you were excluded, or was there a specific decision, or is there somebody who said, no, you mustn't come along?
I was explicitly told by Dr. Ngubane that I should recuse myself from the meeting.
Yeah, the meeting with the minister?
With the minister, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's
Yes.
fine. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's there on the meeting, at the meeting on the 19th, Chairperson.
Yes.
That meeting that takes place overnight.
Yes.
They stop at around 1 the next morning.
But the meeting of the 19th
We
is
have
the
the
position, not that. That's the meeting where they ask him to leave the meeting.
Correct.
And when he comes back, Dr. Ngubane is chairing.
Yes.
And suddenly he's just a director now. He's no longer chairperson from then on, did he ever come back to be a chairperson? Mr. Tsotsi,
Mr.
you never
Tsotsi.
came back to be chairperson, or did you?
No, Chair, I did not chair any
Yeah.
meeting subsequent to
After
that.
that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Is there anything further you want to tell the chairperson about the meeting of the 19th?
Chair, something I thought I observed and I couldn't quite understand what to make of it was that the meeting of the 19th, where I was chairing the meeting at that point in time, was in process, and we were discussing Ascom business. And then at some point, Mr. Romeo Khumalo walked into the meeting. And he whispered something to Mr. Dr. Ngubane. And it is at that point when I was asked to recuse myself from the meeting.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I remember you mentioned that in the past, yeah.
Yes, so I got the impression, for what it is worth, that there was a message that must have come in from somewhere, that it's time to deal with this person in this
Yes.
particular way.
Yes,
That I thought was rather unusual, but that is the last time I chaired a meeting
yeah.
of the board.
Okay.
And incidentally, I also requested, Chair, the minutes of the discussion which took place
In your
on
absence.
on the 30th now, when I was now defending myself in terms of the charges in the presence of my attorneys as well as the Ascom
Counsel.
attorneys. Because at the end of my presentation, I was asked, and my team were asked to recuse ourselves, and the board deliberated. Up to now, I do not know what it is that they were deliberating on, and I've never been able to find out. And I requested those minutes, and I was never given those minutes.
Mr. Selega, has your team asked for the minutes of those deliberations?
Because I may add, Chair, just for ease of reference for Mr. Slicker, if you look at the end of the recordal of the minutes of the 30th, there is a statement there which says minutes of the, whatever they call it, whether it's in committee or what, are kept separately. I was very intrigued by that because
Yes.
it meant that those minutes do exist indeed. But so if you look at the minutes of the 30th of March, the end of that minute, there is a statement at the bottom there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chairperson, what we have in regard to the meeting of the 19th, you have one single document, which is the minutes of the meeting. It records when Mr. Khumalo comes in. It records when the board takes a break and it resumes. And at resumption, Mr. Tsotsi is asked to recuse him, to be excused. And you have a minute of what takes place in his absence. To the end of that discussion when he's called back
Yes.
and the meeting gets adjourned. So you
Yes.
have it in the same document.
Yes, okay.
That's for the 19th, Chair.
Yeah.
That I accept.
Yeah, that's for the 19th.
Yes.
Which is also important. It's good that you have said that, but
Yes.
he has added now something in regard to the 30th minutes. He says,
Yes.
after he and his legal team had made a presentation, they were asked to leave for the board to deliberate, I
Yes.
guess, on the presentation. And he says he has asked for the minutes which would cover those deliberations, and he
Yes.
has never been finished with
Yes.
those.
Yes, no.
And he says the minutes of the 30th
I'm looking at
reflect that those minutes of the deliberations were kept separate.
Yes, it says so.
Yeah, so, which means they must be in existence somewhere.
Yeah, that is, if they recorded them, Chair. They do say, as Mr. Tsotsi points out, just before closure, the minute taker has indicated in-committee minutes are kept separately.
Yes.
I know that we do have some of the minutes of in-committee board meetings. But the investigators don't have the one which Mr. Tsotsi is referring to where he was excused in that meeting.
I think.
So we make a note of that.
I think make a note, and the company secretary must be asked for the minutes of the board's deliberations after the presentation by Mr. Tsotsi and his legal team
Yes,
on the 30th.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just, on that point, Chair, because I think this is very important, because that deliberation will tell us what motivated
Yes.
ultimately for them
Yeah.
to discard my presentation
Yeah,
and in fact opt for
Yeah.
my having to be struck off as a director.
yeah. Well, Dr. Ngubane's evidence, I don't know whether this is what may have emerged from those deliberations. His evidence was that somebody, I don't know if it was him, came up with the idea to say, you know, we must talk to Mr. Tsotsi and say maybe he should resign, because if we pass a vote of no confidence, that's going to impact negatively on him. And I think he says he was then mandated, I don't know whether alone or together with somebody else, to approach you to put this idea of you resigning, to say, look, if the board passes a vote of no confidence, it's going to impact negatively on you. Maybe it's better if you just resign. That's what he said.
Yes, I do recall that, Chair.
Yeah, so it's just that I don't know whether he said that was discussed outside of the deliberations of the board or whether it was during the deliberations. But we know that in the end, that's what happened.
Yes, yes. I also heard that Mr. Poloy was a dissenting voice in those deliberations.
Yes, yes. But it might be helpful to get those minutes if they exist.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. Let's move on.
Yeah, I'll
We
finish.
are at 12
Now-
minutes past 8.
Yes. I've got, Chair, we are finished. You are right. Your Chair is correct that that's Ms. Venita Klein's evidence.
Oh, that's Ms. Klein's evidence.
That's Ms. Venita Klein's
okay,
evidence.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I've got 3 points, Chair. Arising from the affidavit recently received, and the chairperson hasn't seen that affidavit, of Mr. Zitembe Koza, Mr. Tsotsi, which a copy of which you were favored with. Has it been included in the reference bundle? Chair, it has been included in the reference bundle. But there's a paragraph there by Mr. Zitembe Koza, although he...
Do we know what page it is in the bundle? But if you don't think I need to go to it, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
maybe it's fine.
It's the smaller bundle.
You can let me know later on. You can put to Mr. Tsotsi
Yes.
what you want to put to it.
Page 447.
Page
447
on the same bundle.
on the Ascom bundle 13. That's a continuation of the reference bundle.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But continue.
Yes. Mr. Tsotsi, there is an allegation there regarding you.
Just repeat the page for Mr. Tsotsi.
447.
447.
On page That's the beginning page of the affidavit. The specific paragraph I want to read from is 454.
447, I've got the wrong document. What document is it?
Ascom, bundle 13. Ascom, bundle 13. You can have mine. Okay, you
Got it?
Just go straight to page 454. Paragraph 34, Mr. Zitembe Khoza writes, I do not recall that the minister's... No, it's not this one. Yes, there's an allegation he makes about you regarding the pre-suspension letters.
46.
46, thank you. Page 457, Chairperson.
I'm now at 454. You say I must go back to 447?
To 457.
Oh, 457.
457.
Okay.
Paragraph 46.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Zitembe says, I do not recall exactly when and cannot find a record of same. But Tsotsi sent me pre-suspension letters for Marokane, Molefe, Koko, and Matona, which alluded to their alleged misconduct. At the time, I thought that the letters were prepared by Linnell in order to assist the board. However, as the board did not charge the executives in any way, these letters were ultimately never utilized. As I was relieved from my role as chairman of the People and Governance Committee, I transmitted copies of these letters to Klein on 14 March 2015. A copy of the email is annexed here to marked ZK9. Now, Mr. Tsotsi, I provided you with this affidavit. And I believe you have had a chance to look at it.
Yes.
Mr. Zitembe said although he can't recall when and cannot find a record of same, he nonetheless says he got pre-suspension letters from you, and might I add that this pre-suspension letters are also talked about by Ms. Venita Klein in her affidavit, although she doesn't mention you, nor does she mention Mr. Zitembe Khoza in her affidavit, but when she testified here, she said that she recalls she received these letters from Mr. Zitembe Khoza. Now, Mr. Khoza said he received them from you, even though he has no record or recollection of exactly when. Now, Chairperson, these are the letters that in the affidavit of Ms. Venita Klein, she says that were authored by Ms. Suzanne Daniels together with Mr. Salim Essa.
I see Mr. Khoza says that as well.
Says the same thing.
Yeah, well, he certainly says that at paragraph 47.
That's right, Chair.
He says, while preparing this affidavit, I noticed that the pre-suspension letters were actually prepared by Daniels and edited by Mr. Salim Essa. I think it's the same letters that in the previous paragraph, he says he thought he got from Mr. Tsotsi.
Yes.
And he thought they had been prepared by Mr. Linnell.
That's right.
That's what he says at 46, but at 47 he says, when I was preparing this affidavit, I realized effectively, that's what he's saying, that those pre-suspension letters were prepared by Daniels and edited by Mr. Salim Essa. He says the properties of the document show this, as I've now discovered. Again, I did not know how to check who has authored or edited a Word document prior to now.
Yes, Chair. Mr. Tsotsi, your comment on this
Yes, Chair. First of all, I think, I don't know where Mr. Koza got this from, but without a doubt, I never
But
sent any.
Yes, I don't know, Mr. Sele, whether we should bother to let him comment because, in effect, Mr. Koza seems to be retracting that. Or is that not your understanding?
No, that's exactly my understanding, Chair.
Yeah. He first says he thought he got them from Mr. Tsotsi and Mr. They had been prepared by Mr. Linnell. But the next paragraph he says, no, actually, when I was preparing this affidavit, I realized that they were prepared by Daniels and edited by Salim Essa. So I don't think Mr. Tsotsi needs to comment further on it because, in effect, he's withdrawing what he has said before.
Thank you, Chair. Should we move on, Chair?
Yes.
I'm happy to move on.
Yes, move on. Move on.
And then, Mr. Tsotsi, a minor thing. Well, I'm going to leave that one. There's a meeting after you have resigned. You have resigned. There's a meeting between you and Ms. Tsulofelo Molefe, she talks about in her affidavit, where she says, apologize to her that she should not have been suspended.
Yes.
You confirm that meeting?
Yes, Chair. I felt very aggrieved about, in particular, about her suspension. And I just felt the need to say to her that I did not believe that she should have been suspended. And I mean, I made this clear in the way I addressed the issue of the FD coming in as part of the list of executives to be suspended. I pretty much had a good sense of what's likely to happen, let alone the fact that I did not believe that there was anything to investigate in the Department of Finance. When I say I had a sense of what was likely to happen, actually it did occur when I was confronted by a whole host of investors of Ascom who were asking this question. And they were particularly wanted to know what is the FD done? Because, you know, I mean, the financial director is the custodian of the investment of the investors of the business. So I pretty much knew that there was going to be this problem. And incidentally, Mark Pomensky also mentioned that during the I think it was the P&G meeting, if I recall well. So I'm just, you know, connecting these issues because I ultimately felt that I needed to say to Tsulofelo that she should really never have been suspended.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Salega?
Chair, that actually marks the end of my question. I have something on the composition of the subcommittees, but I know he's dealt with it in one way. We will test it with the minister.
Well, if you want to ask him about that, you can ask him.
Can I ask him?
Yeah.
Mr. Tsotsi, Ms. Mkolo has provided us with an affidavit to which some of the emails exchanged between you and the minister are attached. And this specifically relates to the composition of the board. The emails are dated, your email to the minister is 26 January 2015. The minister responds to that by email dated 28 January 2015, 26, 28. You first send an email with the composition. Chair, for your benefit, I think you need to have a look at it. That's Ascom Bundle 10 and Exhibit U22.
Yes.
And this is the last I'm exploring with Mr. Tsotsi. Ascom Bundle 10. Exhibit 22.
Number?
10,
Yes.
Exhibit 22.
Page?
Page 471. And your email starts on page 472, Mr. Tsotsi. Your email is below the minister's email. So your email from Zola Tsotsi, date is 26 January 2015 at 13:52. You address the email to Lynn Brown, 5@me, and the subject is deployment of non-executive board members to board committees. You
My
sent
email is on what page?
472.
472. Okay.
So you forward to the minister your email below. So your email below reads, Dear Minister, please find the revised board subcommittee deployment as follows. Audit and risk, you give the names. And I believe we should read according to how you have almost tabulated them. Is that correct? Under audit and risk is Trita Mabude, and you'd go to the next page. Viroshti Naidu, Nadia Karim, Romeo Kumalo, Norman Baloy.
Yes.
You see that? And the list carries on. Under tender and procurement, you have Ben Gubani as the chairperson. At the next page is Trita Mabude, Zatembe Koza, Nazia Karim. And then the IFC, Matpamensi Pet Nadu Zatembe Koza Venita Klein, and so on. There are some mistakes here in the names, the spelling of the names.
Yep.
For instance, Nazia Karim, she's not Nadia, she's Nazia.
Right.
Mr. Kumalo is spelled without the H.
Yeah.
Mr. Koza is not Zatemba, is Zitembe Koza.
Yes.
Were these your mistakes? Typographical errors?
There must have been, Chair. Typographical errors.
Then the
But are
minister,
you sure that this was your composition?
Yes, Chair, on the basis of this email, it has to be, yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, let me step back.
You remember
Let me step
there is
back.
another composition that that we are still looking for. I don't know if you have found
Yes,
it in the
yes.
meantime.
Chair, this email is a culmination of the back and forth that occurred on this issue between the minister and myself. And I guess I should say between three of us, Salem Issa, minister, and myself. Now, I would imagine that following the minister's insistence, when we met at her house, where I said Tony Gupta was present and so was Salim Essa, this would have been ultimately what she had wanted to have. So I'm saying that this probably would not represent what I had wanted, but the likelihood that it would represent what the minister had wanted. And together with whoever was Salim Essa in this instance would have wanted. So I'm saying, because I look at the date and I see that we're communicating with the minister at the end of January. And the back and forth with the minister and Salim Issa would have started sometime conceivably in December, if not early January.
Chairperson, incidentally, we do have Mr. Tsotsi's email of December 2014 to the minister.
Oh.
Which is not part of the record, and I'm going to beg the chairperson's leave to hand it up for the purposes of the chairperson's comparison and Mr. Tsotsi's benefit.
Yes.
We will mark it accordingly for inclusion into the record. And Mr. Tsotsi could briefly then explain to the chairperson how the two documents compare. One for the chairperson, one for the witness. So the email handed up, chairperson, is an email from Zola Tsotsi, sent on Tuesday, 16 December 2014 at 14:02, also sent to lynn.brown5@me.com, and the subject is also deployment of non-executive board members to board committees. And he says, "Dear Minister, I trust you are well and enjoying some rest. Please find below the preliminary deployment of non-executive board members to board committees. The audit committee at Ascom has always been chaired by a CA. I presume that means a chartered accountant. Mr. Tsotsi?"
Yeah, it obviously means that.
Yeah. Not a candidate attorney, sir.
No.
We may have to deal with media reaction to this change. Are you contemplating limiting the board to 13? The previous board had 14 members. For those serving on three committees, depending on their day jobs, the workload may be quite taxing. So would this have been the first email you sent, Mr. Tsotsi? And I noticed sorry, can I give you a chance to answer them, Mr. Tsotsi? Would this have been the first email you sent to the minister?
I can't recall whether this is the first one, but certainly it was in December, which accords with what I recall was when the interaction was taking place.
And I also noticed the errors in the surnames of some of your board members. The Tembe Khoza is spelled with an X.
Yes, I wouldn't have imagined that you would spell Khoza like that, Mr.
Yeah, that's a gross error, Chair. That is a gross error.
Could this be Salim Essa's list, Mr. Tsotsi?
I mean, I can't imagine that you would spell Khoza with an X.
Yeah, that's
unless it was your secretary and your secretary was somebody who could make this kind of mistake.
Yes, I see that.
And then you did not check
twice.
properly.
His name has been repeated as Zatembe Khoza.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Yeah, that's definitely an error.
But also,
yes, Chair.
I see you were going to serve, you being chairperson of the board, you were going to serve as a member, as an ordinary member in various committees. Is that normal?
Yeah. In IFC?
If you're chairperson of the board, don't you chair just the board and you don't go to other committees because they must report to the board, those committees, and you are chairing the board?
Chair, it's been a tradition in Ascom that the chairman does participate in some of the committees. In fact, the chairman is limited. Well, obviously, the chairman would not serve in the statutory committee. But the chairman is generally limited to the People and Governance Committee and the Social and the, is it the Ethics? Can't remember. There's another committee that the chairman is limited to.
It just looks
But
very,
certainly not the IFC.
it looks very strange to me because if the Chief Justice who chairs the heads of courts goes to a committee and he's just a member, an ordinary member of that committee is chaired by somebody else, it looks very awkward if the president who chairs a cabinet meeting
Yes.
then goes to a subcommittee of the cabinet and then he attends as an ordinary member and that committee is chaired by somebody else. It's strange.
Yes. I can accept that, yes.
But is it what you intended? Because one of the things I think Mr. Selega is looking at and I'm looking at is whether this genuinely came from you. But if it genuinely came from you, that's what you say, and we accept.
This would have come from me, yes.
It came from you.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, all right. In which case, obviously, your secretary wouldn't have put your name in certain committees unless you had said.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Yeah, Mr.
Okay.
Tsotsi,
Yes.
yeah, do not leave the chairperson with the impression that is your secretary who typed this.
Well, probably the secretary typed, but if she typed or he typed what he said she should type, then it's not her fault or his fault. I think what Mr. Koza has, Mr. Tsotsi, I'm sorry, Mr. Tsotsi, has said is the composition reflected what he
Okay.
wanted.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Chair. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And you were saying, but certainly not you, Mr. Zola Tsotsi, chairman of the board, on the IFC.
Yeah, well, that's a bit odd. It would
Yes.
not have been a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it also still begs the question, well, is this your list?
Well,
Well, he has said
I
it is his.
I can only say it's mine because
Yeah, he has said it's his.
I'm the one who
He
sent
has-
the email to the minister.
So
I cannot
we accept that, yeah.
dissociate myself from it.
It's all right.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all right. But then, Chair, lastly on this, if you go back to the file, is the minister's reply to Mr. Tsotsi.
About the composition.
Yes.
Yeah.
That email, let me see, I think is duplicated. We can read it on the next page, which is page 474.
Which bundle?
The bundle where your email, Ascom bundle 10, exhibit 22.
Oh, the same one. we're looking
The
at.
same one, yes.
What page?
Page 474, 474.
Oh, the next page.
Yeah, the next page. So the minister responds to you 28 January 2015 at 8:21. And she copies a couple of people there, Matsietsi Mukolo, Brandon Roberts, and others. And she says, Dear Mr. Tsotsi, thank you for the email below regarding the composition of board committees. Given that this is a newly appointed board, it is my responsibility as shareholder representative to formally consider the composition of the committees. I would therefore appreciate it if the composition of board committees is submitted under formal cover letter with the following supporting information: a copy of the board resolution on the composition, the draft resolution for shareholder approval of members of the Audit and Risk Committee, a draft shareholder resolution confirming membership of, I think it's Social and Ethics Committee and Sustainability, a draft shareholder resolution noting all other committees, list of all directors' disclosure of interest including, and the rest of it is there. what I did not understand, Mr. Tsotsi, and maybe you can explain to the chairperson and us, is the minister's statement that, given that this is a newly appointed board, it is my responsibility as shareholder to formally consider the composition of the committees. Because we've understood from some of the witnesses who testified here that the minister's responsibility would have only related to 2 statutory subcommittees.
Exactly. Chair, that's correct. With the statutory subcommittees, what would happen is that whatever proposal the board may make on those committees is expressly subject to the approval of the minister. So,
Yes, because in regard to that committee or those committees,
yes,
she has the power.
correct.
Now, in regard to other committees, has she got any power?
No, Chair, she doesn't have.
So that, to the extent that she says in the email that the composition of all committees of the board is subject to her power, she has the power to decide that, that would not be correct.
No, Chair, that's not correct.
Yes.
What the board is doing is giving the shareholder the courtesy of knowing who is involved in which committees.
Yes, but not because
Not because
she
this
has
is
the power to
mandated, yes.
decide that.
Correct.
Yeah. In her affidavit, does she repeat this?
She deals with this, Chair. To some extent,
I guess we are wrapping up now.
I am, Chair. I have, in fact.
There may be staff who might still need to go some long distances home. Who didn't know they have to stay longer today. It's all my fault.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Quickly, that's back to your bundle, Mr. Tsotsi. And that's on page 444. Page 444 from paragraph 43 onwards.
What does she say?
She confirms that she's responsible only for the appointment of members of 2 board subcommittees,
Yeah.
Audit and Risk and Social and Ethics Committee.
Yeah.
And then she goes into the process at DPE that she would be guided in appointing members of the board.
Yeah.
But then she doesn't stop at Audit and Risk and Social and Ethics. In paragraph 47, she goes on about she would have followed the same process for the other subcommittees
Yeah.
in respect of the 2 that she said she's responsible for. But then she says, I cannot recall offhand whether this is what happened regarding the 2014 appointment of the committees.
Yeah, no, that's fine. If her affidavit says she's only responsible for those 2 committees,
Yes.
that's fine. When she comes, she will give
Explain the
evidence
rest.
about that email,
Yes.
and she can provide clarification.
Yeah. Mr. Tsotsi, just right at the end now, there's an email in December 2014 you sent to the minister with the composition. Then there's an email on the 26th of January 2015 that you sent to the minister with a composition. Now, what informed the email, the composition in the email of 26 January 2015? Now, my question is, let me put it, is that the composition that the minister wanted in January when you sent it to him?
That would be the case, Chair, because as I said, The back and forth occurred during the month of December primarily. And what culminated in then the formal submission to the minister would then be the composition as the minister had wanted it to be.
So is the position that in regard to all the committees, you or the board ended up basically letting her have or decide the composition?
That's the de facto situation, Chairman.
That is what ultimately happened?
Yes.
Yes. Because in the email she had said it's her, as the shareholder, she would decide.
Yes.
Okay.
So then that means the minister went beyond the limited two subcommittees that she's responsible for.
It would appear so by her own admission, because she is saying that she needs the formal document for her consideration. You recall that's what you read earlier in the email.
Yeah. No, that's one thing. That's one thing, yes.
Yes.
But I'm talking factually from the composition in your subsequent email, that is what the minister wanted you.
That's what the minister had wanted.
How to compose.
Wanted to be ultimately, yes.
So it went beyond just the two subcommittees.
Yes, correct.
You see, the reason why I was remarking on the spelling mistakes is because the Fundutsi report shows that a composition had been received by the DPE from businessman's email info portal. And the spellings, the misspellings, were like in your first email. Mr. Zitembe Koza is spelled with an X.
Yes.
And I thought that was remarkable. Coincidence?
That's an interesting coincidence, yes. It's a very interesting coincidence, Chairman.
Well, unless well, you remember your evidence previously
Yes.
was that you received a composition and a fax or email from Mr. Salim Essa
Yes.
with how the committees of the board should be composed of.
Yes.
And you were not happy with that. You sent your own composition of the committees of the board to the minister.
Yes.
And then you testified and you said the minister sent you her composition. And you said her composition of the committees of the board was exactly the same
Yes.
as the composition of Mr. Salim Essa that you were not happy with.
Yes. That's correct.
You remember you said that?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, it is possible if you say your composition of the board committees of, is it 26 January?
26 January, Chair.
If you say that was the culmination of the toing and froing involving you and the minister and Mr. Salim Essa, and if you say that that composition was what the minister wanted, and if what the minister had previously sent you was the same as what you had received from Mr. Salim Essa, then it may be that the minister sent you a list with those spelling errors, because those spelling errors maybe were included in Salim Essa's list composition. And what you didn't do is to correct those spelling errors. That's one possibility of looking at it.
Yes. That's quite plausible, Chairman.
Because for you, it really seems very strange that you would spell Khoza with an X.
Yes, exactly.
But anyway, I think
That's the end, Chair.
Was that your last question?
That's the end, Chair.
If there are any other questions, you can always send them to Mr. Tsotsi
Yes,
with a request for him to respond to them by way of an affidavit.
yes, Chair.
So
Certainly,
that, yeah.
certainly.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tsotsi. Sorry, oh, yes.
You want to say?
Oh, I looked for you here because I thought last time you were sitting this side. I may have been mistaken, so I didn't realize you are there.
No, thank you. Understood,
Yes,
Chairperson.
yes.
I have just 2 points only.
2 questions.
Yes, just
Okay, all right, yes.
thank you.
That's the re-examination, eh?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, all right.
Mr. Tsotsi, you spoke at length regarding the meeting of the 30th of March in which you first went to your presentation. There was an adjournment and subsequently you were approached by Mr. Romeo Khumalo together with Dr. Ben Ngubane, which culminated in you going back to the formal board meeting and tendered your resignation. Now, I just want first to confirm for the chairperson in your own words whether the resignation tendered was voluntary or not.
Chair, that's a very, very interesting question, and not an easy question to actually answer.
Yes.
Because you recall that the state of mind I was in was one of someone who is being accused of things that were certainly very flimsy. I made the point in the meeting with the board in my own defense to say that these charges were are definitely spurious and were of no substance whatsoever. And this was confirmed by my legal team that in effect what they're putting forward is really of no substance. And I realized that if I was to challenge this situation any further, it is going to impact on the company and take away from the focus of what Ascom should be doing, and that is to recover from the situation that it's in. And I really did not want to be party to defocusing Ascom and bringing the focus upon myself. So my resignation, in a sense, was forced because I felt that I did not want to be an albatross around the neck of the company. And I consented to then resigning for that reason. Not because I felt that I did not have a winnable case, nor that I capitulated to the accusations that we were making. Quite the contrary. As I say, it was really in the interest of making sure that the business does not have to have a fallout out of this situation occasioned by my resistance. So that is really the essence. To answer the question, I felt it was a forced situation on my part.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, following through that, I suppose it's some common cause now that the resignation was received and accepted. There were certain commitments made to you by the board to meet certain obligations. Without naming them, were any of those obligations that were made to you met by the board or by the company?
No, Chair, none of them were met altogether. None of them were. In fact, I don't know why you want to restrict me from commenting about what it is I should say, what they're about, but one important issue has got to do with my legal fees.
Yeah, you mentioned that last
so,
time.
So I felt done by the attitude of Ascom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, my next question is, what effect would your removal, or rather, what effect did your removal from the board of as chairman of Ascom have on you, seeing that you had already testified that this pretty much was the only job you could hold because of the enormity of the work that you had to do?
Chairman, I can only describe it as debilitating, to be quite honest. I lost, not only income, but I lost opportunities for further income. It became very clear that people who were supposedly associated or tainted with state capture, say so, were being shunned by prospective employers. And there were all sorts of stories and rumors going around. One in particular concerned me because it was said that the Gupta family went out of its way to draw up a list of all those people who should not be engaged by, certainly by the public sector. And my name apparently is one of them. So I'm just saying I would not want to relive a situation again.
Mm.
Yeah.
Chairperson, I think that concludes my questions. I just need maybe to place it on the record that whilst we may have received from Mr. Tsotsi the letters that confirm him as an implicated person by some of the witnesses, we've adopted an approach that says that we've been fairly satisfied with the manner in which the evidence leader poses the different versions.
Yes.
And instead of complicating and in the spirit of expedition of this work of this commission,
Yes.
we just want to formally record our reservation. In the eventuality that it's absolutely needed, then we'll submit the applications at that point.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. That's my
No,
stance.
no, thank you. I think that's that's the right approach, I think, yeah. Okay, Mr. Tsotsi, thank you very much. I know that you will still come back because Mr. Salega knows that he thinks he has troubled you enough. I thought he might be needing you for the secondment, but now I remember you were no longer there during the secondments. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tsotsi, for coming to assist the commission. We appreciate it very much, and thank you for coming in the evening.
I'm available in a consulting capacity.
Thank you very much. It's 2 minutes to 9. We adjourn. Thank you to everybody for all your cooperation. Again, I'm sorry to those who didn't know that we were going to end up working so late. Next time we'll try and make sure everybody knows well in advance. We adjourn.
All right.